Welcome, everyone, to the Chris Vaccaro celebration of joy and happiness here at Player Profiler. The Fantasy Empire. Let me bring our little names down. Boop. There we go. Chrissy V, Nando DeFino. Chris is basically going to take an hour today and just brag about his triumphs in 2 leagues out of the 500 that he's entered in the high stakes leagues. Chris, congratulations, man. I mean, you must be. How do you celebrate this? Do you go drink?
No, Nando. Thanks.
You won the New York auction and the main event.
How do you know this, by the way? I didn't tell you.
You texted me.
Did I tell you that?
Yeah, you sent me a picture of your sweatpants, and then you said, "Hey, I just won 2 leagues."
I don't even know where you come up with this stuff, man. I really don't.
What do you think? I'm making up that you won 2 high stakes leagues? Everybody knows, it's public knowledge.
Yes, I'm not talking about that. I'm just talking about the sweatpants thing. Anyway, Nando, the fantasy season is a wrap. I am relieved. It's a good feeling to know it's in the past. It's a weird feeling, actually, not going into fantasy league after fantasy league and looking at your teams and getting them ready and seeing what you have to do after doing it for 17 straight weeks. If you're someone like me, I'm constantly going into each of my teams all day long, night long, and it's just an everyday grind that you get used to for 4 or 5 months straight.
Yeah.
And then it's over like that, and it's like, wow, I got all this extra time. Time to take my ass to the gym.
Is that what you're going to do?
So, yeah, it's nice to have all this extra time now to do certain stuff, but fantasy season was good to me, and
was it? I mean, like weekly on the show, it sounded like your team hadn't won a game yet. The way you griped about your teams and said, "Oh, the season's terrible. I can't believe this season. It's the worst." And meanwhile, you're winning titles.
No, I don't think I have. I don't think I ever was like that, Nando. There was, there's certain teams early on in the season losing Nick Chubb. That was devastating. Then that was followed up by losing Barkley to a high ankle sprain and not having him for a while.
Yeah.
Those were probably 2 of my highest owned players. So, add in Mike Williams, who I lost in a lot of places. That's, but everybody had to deal with injuries this year, Nando. It was a crazy season. They all are. So I don't want to say like, oh, this year was crazy like no other, because they're all nuts.
And I want to get into week.
Yeah, but you know what? This season down the stretch was crazy. This episode, we want to cover a lot of the players that won fantasy titles, how they did it, how their teams were built.
Yep.
And everything. And down the stretch run, these last 4 or 5 weeks, teams lost major players, major fantasy contributors to their teams that made powerhouse teams not as powerful, and gave chances to middle of the pack teams that were getting like Breece Hall's back and, a big finish for Jahmyr Gibbs and other players, so it's the fantasy landscape is just changing, Nando, to a point where you don't have to have a powerhouse team from the start to finish. You just need to get your team in the playoff rounds. If you're in home leagues, get them in as the 4, 5, 6 seed and have the right combination of hot players for the final month and avoid injuries. Right. And if you do all that, nowadays, it's different than 10 years ago. It just seems like. So we're going to cover all that and more in this episode. And Nando, how did you do in your championship final before I get into mine and the rest of other people's championships? But I know everybody's living and dying knowing that you were in a championship game.
Yeah.
Your
I was what you described. We lost guys to injuries, and I'm looking at my lineup like, how did I make it to the final with this lineup? And I didn't. It's because, we just had to swerve at the last moment. And I picked up like 9 guys throughout the week, add a drop just based on, and it's just, I looked at my lineup and I knew like this is not going to win a title right here. So
you lost.
Finished second. I won second place. That's how I like to think of it.
Well, when you lose in the championship game, that's second place, Nando. So yeah.
All right. Let me ask you, how many leagues? Like you're talking about these 2 leagues, like you're the greatest player in the world.
You're such
First
a
of all,
dick.
how many were you in? How many did Chad Schroeder win?
Oh, man. Chad Schroeder had a great tweet. I don't know if you saw it the other day. It's kind of mind-boggling. He entered $751,000 in league entries this year, and his comeback was like 802,000. And it was like a $50,000 profit for him. He considered it, like a terrible season, a waste of time, obviously.
Right.
When you're investing that much money and time and effort into, a business. Because, people don't understand it from our point of view, Nando. It's, I treat it as a business as well. As much as I am addicted and love this fantasy business and high stakes world, you have to treat it as a business. We're putting a lot of money up. And it's not like it's just throwaway money. This is money that you're looking to make a profit on each year, and you have to treat it as a business. So that's what I'm sure he did, looking at it and all the time he put in and dedicated it to it. But it got a lot of attention on Twitter this week just because of the astronomical numbers. As for myself, Nando, I think I was at 48 total leagues.
Wow. And you won 2. Congratulations, man.
No, I won more than that, buddy, but that's fine. The truth of the matter is, Nando, my 4 biggest leagues, my 4 biggest, highest buy-ins, I won 3 out of 4 of them. And in the 4th one, which was the New York Super, which I consider my second most important league. It's a very prestigious league that I want to win every single year, and I won the regular season title. I thought I had the inside track. No, it's not. It's the equivalent of the New York Super. There's the New York Super and the New York Super auction. Same buy-in, but the New York Super is more prestigious, Nando. And I won the regular season title. I think I was like 13-1 record. And going into the playoffs, I lost Keenan Allen and Ramondre Stevenson, and then Trevor Lawrence got banged up. But here's the craziest story. We'll start with this one while we're on the topic. Dan Satinoff won the New York Super. And as you know, in the high stakes market, when you have these private leagues like the New York Super, it's 12 teams and 4 advance to the championship round, and it's a 3-week cumulative run of points for the winner. Now, Dan Satinoff got off to a huge lead after the second week of points. He was up 55 points. So it was like going into the 3rd week, it was a run for who could finish in second. Anyway, that Cowboys game on Saturday night, I got CD Lamb and a couple other big performances, and I passed him. Okay. Nice. And he had a team where he lost Amari Cooper, Cortland Sutton, and maybe 2 other guys for the final going into that championship week. And then he had to get in some replacements, right, Nando? Here's where the funny part comes in. So it hits Sunday. I look like I'm going to win this thing. I'm up. It's almost like 4:00. The 1:00 games are ending. I have like a 20-point lead on him. And I have Gerald Everett.
Why were you sending me screenshots? We could have celebrated together.
I would never. Yeah. Yes. But here's the craziest part, Nando. He was down to his 7th wide receiver on his roster that he had to get in his lineup and play. And it was Trey Palmer of the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. He actually had to start in championship week, Trey Palmer. Now, when I saw that, I was like, oh, God, he's going to maybe get 2 points out of Trey Palmer or a 0, and I'm good. And Trey Palmer basically had a 0 all day long. In the 4th quarter, Trey Palmer caught 4 balls for 81 yards and a touchdown, gave him 18 fantasy points. And I wound up losing when Gerald Everett caught 1 ball the all second half by 3 points, the New York Super. Wow. And it's all basically because of Trey Palmer saving Dan Satinoff's life to win the New York Super and basically crush my dreams. So that was my bad beat in championship, and which was basically a great final week for me, but that was just devastating, and it hurt to lose in that fashion with Trey Palmer doing me in. And it's funny because Dan Satinoff's team in this New York Super was led by who, Nando, the final 4 weeks? Joe Flacco.
That's amazing.
Can you believe
Good
that?
for him. He started
Joe
Flacco
Flacco.
last week too, huh?
Yeah. No, he did not. That's
right.
another crazy part of the story is he went away from Joe Flacco in the game versus the Jets on Thursday night, where a lot of people were like, hey, listen, I'm, this looks like a low-scoring game. It looks like a bust game. And he went to Derek Carr, and Derek Carr gave him 10 points less, and it almost cost him the championship. But if you remember the week before, the reason why he blew past all of us was Joe Flacco to Amari Cooper. His combination gave him like 100 points and, put us in the position we were in. So go figure. Joe Flacco goes and delivers the New York Super Championship, and that just goes to add on to the crazy title, crazy ending of the season where people won fantasy championships riding Joe Flacco.
What are we drinking? It's a very large coffee.
I need it every day, buddy. It's a Venti Pike place with a shot of espresso in it.
Oh,
so
all right.
But listen, this isn't about me. Yes, I was lucky enough. I was lucky enough, Nando, to win the my biggest league, the NFFC Diamond, and cash a big check there, as well as the New York auction. I'm happy with the way my season ended up. I'm going to kick my feet up and relax, go on vacation and everything. But
where are you going? Where are we going?
Haven't decided yet. Maybe Aruba. Anywhere where there's a beach where I can, put the stress of this last 4 months behind me. Nando.
I thought you were going to say take pictures of your legs and post them on Facebook.
Yeah, that's funny. Great joke again for the 800th time.
It's funny because it's our last show ever.
Yeah.
So let me ask you a question before we get into you naming everybody else and how well they did.
Listen, we got it. You know what? I know you're joking and everything, but we're a high stakes show, and it's time that after a long season, we give what the kids say nowadays: give your flowers out to the champions and review, and that's how you learn. And we're learning at the same time what worked for teams, how they built their teams, what went right for them, wrong for them, and that's why this show is I think going to be helpful for people and fun. There's no point in talking about. There's no point talking about week 18 in fantasy, because if you're playing fantasy for a championship game in week 18, you are just doing it wrong. And look no further than all the players that are going to be out, and the Niners that are going to be sitting, and the Ravens that are going to be sitting in this week, and everyone else. Oh, sophisticated Nando showed up to the show.
I'm just doing props now while you talk.
Glass. Yeah, and that's what this week should really be about, Nando. That's what I'm looking forward to. I'm looking forward to sitting back, watching actual football, betting on these games, betting player props, maybe playing DFS. That's what week 18 should be about. The stress is over of the regular season, and now you get to sit and actually enjoy football and see how teams shape up before we get ready for the playoffs. But go ahead, Nando, to your point.
So my question for you was that auction team and that diamond team, which was a draft.
Yeah.
How similar were those rosters? Like, because it's two totally different ways to build a team unless you really want to build it the same. I know you always have your core guys. How did you build those two similarly, I guess?
Great question.
Or were they not similar at all?
They were similar in the fact that they both had Kyren Williams, who,
drafted or added?
Yes. Drafted on the Diamond team and bid on in the auction, in the Super Auction League. And while we're on Kyren Williams, because he is absolutely the darling of fantasy owners everywhere, I did want to. I got to find this. I'm sorry. I should have.
Hey, while you're looking things up.
Wait, no. I have it right here. Kyren Williams. The American Blood Clot Association. That's what he would like people that won their fantasy championships because of him, which obviously, he was probably the biggest reason why we're sitting here today. Most of us fantasy champions. Most of the top fantasy players give out now what they would like fantasy owners to donate to. And that's his foundation, Nando. So for everyone listening, he would like the American Blood Clot Association. Okay.
How much did you
But
give?
that would be that I will be sending
Yeah.
a donation
I don't
to
believe that.
him now. I will show
don't
you.
believe that.
Anyway,
Did you have
that's
Cam?
ridiculous to say that. Cam
Akers?
No.
Like,
Why
did
would
you
I have
get Kyron Williams independent? He wasn't a handcuff to Cam Akers on your team.
No. I was in on Kyron Williams. He was on a good amount of my teams. He was on my top 3 online championship teams that won leagues. And I had him in a couple other places, but I'm sure thankful that, I made sure I got him on my Diamond championship team and this super auction team. So just real quick,
Well, I got to follow up.
Okay, go ahead.
Look, go ahead. Usually when you say real quick, you change the subject.
No, I'm talking. You asked me about
Oh,
similarities of these teams. It was Kyron Williams, and it was an elite quarterback strategy. The super auction team, I made sure I got Lamar Jackson, who obviously down the stretch, the MVP of the league and fantasy, 320 and 5 touchdowns this final week. I wanted to build that super auction team, Nando, around a Detroit Lions stack. So I had Sam Laporta. He was my main target at tight end. Amon-Ra St. Brown, who was my favorite first round wide receiver. He was on a lot of my championship league teams. And David Montgomery, who, if you remember us talking about, he was my target in the 8th round that I wanted to make sure I got as my RB2 in a lot of leagues. He faded a little bit down the stretch, but he had his moments. So the team was a Lions stack with Kyron Williams, Saquon Barkley, Lamar Jackson. The Diamond team was Kyron Williams and Raheem Mostert and James Cook.
Oh, you
so
hated
coming
Raheem
down
Mostert.
Now James Cook completely faded out, Nando, the last 2 weeks, but James Cook really got me to the championship rounds. The team was loaded. I swept the regular season points and record title, as well as the playoffs, obviously, and the combination. And we're going to get into these other teams, and you're going to see that common theme: Kyron Williams and Raheem Mostert. Those were the guys that just were dominating all year long. And, Kyron Williams had his middle of the season where he missed time, but those were after the 10th round, probably the 2 best picks you could have made was Mostert, Kyron Williams, a Tank Dell, and a Puka Nacua, right? So those 4 guys,
no one was taking.
Say it again.
Puka was a fab ad.
Yeah, in your leagues, he was. Puka Nacua was drafted in every high-stakes league.
Everyone's on Tutu Atwell. And
okay, you want to tell me? Okay, Puka Nacua was on everybody's. Puka Nacua was drafted by everybody between the 15th and 18th rounds of every high stakes league. So those combination of 4 guys really helped your teams out, as well as like a Nico Collins in the 10th and 11th round. He was great too, and CJ Stroud at quarterback. And that's it. My Diamond team, besides those guys at running back, Jalen Hurts, I made sure in a standalone league, I wanted to focus on getting the elite quarterback. Jalen Hurts was great for me, more in fantasy world than in real life world. And Jamar Chase was my first round pick, surrounded by Deebo Samuel and Brandon Ayuk. I went for the 49ers wide receiver stack. And one guy on that team that I want to focus on, Nando, because I have it written down here, Evan Ingram doesn't get enough publicity this year, Nando. But if I asked you, how many receptions does Evan Ingram have this year? What would you tell me?
86.
Okay, you're off by 20. Imagine
106.
that. He's got 104 catches for 884 yards. Isn't that crazy for a tight end going into the final week? He's going to wind up with about I think he had like 135, something like that. Now, his yards aren't crazy. He's got 885 receiving yards because, Evan Ingram's the king of like the 7 catch for 45-yard game. But for a tight end, for 104 catches, it's really under the radar. He really, when you hear about everybody on shows talking about the tight end position, everybody gushes over Laporta, Kincaid at one point, and all these other guys. But it's, Evan Ingram doesn't get the recognition he did for the season and where he was drafted, because Evan Ingram was basically a 9th, 10th round, an 8th through 10th round draft pick at tight end. And he was golden for me. Just wanted to get out that stat line for Evan Ingram. And going into next year, it's going to be interesting where people draft him off of what will probably be 110-yard catch season. So, and I added Isaiah Likely before the fantasy playoffs, and he was great as well.
What a
So
title
Isaiah
game.
Likely, I really had a tough time deciding the fantasy playoff weeks who to play, Evan Ingram or Isaiah Likely. And in the championship week with Raheem Mostert not playing, Nando, I flexed out Isaiah Likely and started Evan Ingram, and they gave me 13 and 19 fantasy points. So double tight end. I'll do it whenever the situation applies, Nando. So that was my good fortune, and I'm happy with the way the season wound up. But there's so many great stories behind these overall champions, Nando, that I just think that the people listening will really enjoy these stories that play the high stakes market. Each one had a unique story to them, and I do want to get into that. So
Puka's average draft position in NFFC was 279.
What else do you want to talk about before we get into the? Say that again.
No, that's I just want to.
You froze. I didn't hear you.
No, you froze.
I probably
maybe you could upgrade to the higher FiOS plan now that you've got some money in your pocket.
Maybe.
Puka's average draft position in NFFC was 279.
You don't know how to do that, right? You're probably looking. We know that by now with the filters. You have no clue how to filter. You're looking at 7 months of drafts.
You draft after the first week, though. So isn't that unfair? No, people draft after the free look.
The free look. So how does that affect? They didn't play in the first game. So again, I don't know why. I don't know what your point is of that. You're laughing because you just make yourself look ridiculous more and more.
It's ridiculous. So what am I supposed to pull here?
Toronto Dave says Flacco and Njoku carried my teams. Absolutely, Toronto Dave. It was crazy, actually, how the Cleveland Browns carried fantasy managers for the final month of the season out of nowhere. I mean, if you think about the teams that we were focused on for fantasy that flamed out, like the Buffalo Bills. Stephon Diggs murdered his fantasy managers. James Cook hurt his fantasy managers with, I think, a 6 and a 4 the final 2 weeks. The whole Bills offense dudded. But yet here, the Browns with Joe Flacco, Amari Cooper, and David Njoku, and even Jerome Ford that final week, carried people to fantasy championships. So yeah, pretty crazy to me that was the case.
Could you imagine starting Joe Flacco and being like, he's got the Jets and no Amari Cooper. Like, let's do this anyway. Could you imagine that?
Yeah.
I wonder how many people did that.
It happened because after that Thursday night game, it was funny to see the people that shot up the leaderboard and that were sitting in the top 5 overall, and they were Joe Flacco owners. It was really interesting because Amari Cooper got all these fantasy managers to the top of the leaderboard after the second week of the fantasy playoffs when he blew up for the 51-point performance. And then an hour before championship week on Thursday night, everybody had to pull Amari Cooper out of their starting lineups that were in the top 10. Imagine you're going for the overall championships. You have to take the guy who got you there, Amari Cooper, out of your starting lineup. People were already iffy on him because of the supposed tough matchup against the Jets, right? And then you have to take him out of your lineup. And it's funny because I'm looking at like 4 or 5 of the teams in the top 10 of the NFFC Prime Time, Nando.
Yeah.
And they didn't have good replacements for him. Okay, now let's also remember that Jalen Waddle was on a handful of teams in the top 10 because he was having a good fantasy playoff run. He was out. So all these managers I'm looking at, they had to go to their bench and try and replace Cooper and Waddle, who was, a second-round pick and a third or fourth-round pick. And they didn't have the ammunition to come and replace him, right? So that hurt them in championship week. The eventual... Yeah. Let's jump into this. The eventual NFFC Primetime champion, Jeff Kozlowski, who I personally know, he drafts live in New York City every year. He was.
I heard he's got a great story. I heard there's a great story there.
There is, and I'm going to get into it. It's pretty funny because he the most shocking thing about his team, Nando, was he's a Keenan Allen owner. He went on to win the NFFC overall championship. He started the week in 46th overall place, okay, and shot up the leaderboard. He scored 244 points in the championship week without Keenan Allen, who got him pretty much to the championship round. And he did it with his bench replacements, which was Arashi Rice. So you come in, and if you have the depth there, okay, to overcome a Keenan Allen. Once you lose a Keenan Allen, who was the best fantasy draft pick you could have made this year up until him going down.
Kyron Williams is a better draft pick?
Listen, value-wise, it's tomato, right, Nando? We're talking about a guy that you got in the 15th round who was a fantasy superstar and a great pick. But when you're looking at the early part of the draft board, I guess we could say like the top 60 overall, right? Who was the best pick early on in drafts?
Sure.
It was Keenan Allen in the 3rd round. So, however you want to look at it. While we're on that topic, it's pretty amazing that Jeff managed to win this fantasy title without Kyron Williams or without a big-time running back. Let's just quickly review his team, Nando, okay? He drafted out of the 10 hole, okay? Now, his team's pretty familiar looking-wise because this was my kind of favorite start on a couple of my teams. He drafts Amon-Ra St. Brown at 10th overall, comes back. He gets Devontae Adams, who Devontae Adams all year long was pretty much a bust. But he gets this team into the championship round, Nando, and Devontae Adams has a huge week 15 on that Thursday night versus the Chargers, right, to get him going. He completely busts in the second week of the fantasy playoffs at 1 point against the Colts, if you remember that. Not against the Colts, I'm sorry, against the Chiefs, when Aiden O'Connell barely threw the ball.
Yeah.
Okay, so he has him in. He completely busts with that week. And then in the championship week, he comes back with a really huge game to help him win the overall championship. 3rd round, he goes Keenan Allen. Home run pick, right? So my dream start would have been Amon-Ra in the 1st at the back end of the 1st round and Keenan Allen in the 3rd. So Jeff hits on the money pairing right there. So he's got 3 monster wide receivers. In the 4th round, he goes Lamar Jackson. So he has his elite quarterback. And then in the 5th round, Brandon Ayuk, money pick. Okay? So this is my favorite type of draft, Nando, if you know me. Three receivers, a big-time elite quarterback, and a nice 4th wide receiver to start. Yep. So through 5 rounds, you got 4 monster receivers and your elite quarterback, and then you start hitting the running backs. This is where it's funny because his 6th round pick, his lead running back, which this is the whole 0 RB approach that I, always like to go to, Nando.
What you invented.
That you like to make fun of. Yeah, that you like to make fun of. But
I don't make fun of it. I give you credit every time for inventing it. And then you're like, well, not really, sir.
Okay. Well, either way, Nando, the funny thing is his RB1 bell cow was Dameon Pierce.
Wow. Probably
Probably the worst pick you could make at the
this
running
back position. This is a great story
position.
about how to overcome, like a lot of this bad stuff and win an entire. Yeah.
It's also
a bunch of guys who don't really know how to play fantasy.
Yeah, there you go. After that, Isaiah
you just
Pacheco.
Gotta have money, really.
Isaiah Pacheco. Yeah, you keep throwing your digs in. So listen, Isaiah Pacheco and Devin A-Chain were his main running backs. That was great for Isaiah Pacheco to get back and overcome the concussion in that final week.
Where did he take
and help him? 10th round.
Wow, all right, nice.
And Evan Ingram was his starting tight end, which we just talked about. So listen, interesting running back room there. You could overcome that when you hit on monster receivers and an elite quarterback at the right time. Another unbelievable thing, like we talked about, was Jeff was 6-8. That was his record in the regular season. Nice. Okay, so you don't need to dominate all year long and then go into the playoffs. Just get hot at the right time, and Jeff did. And and it's crazy because I noticed Jeff's team. I spoke to him during the year at one point. Halfway through the season, he was up there in the top 10. His team was, looked really good to me. Jeff is one of these guys that he's been coming to New York and drafting for a long time. And I always admired the way he drafted. He always builds strong teams. Just one of those players that's underrated, and he knows how to build a team. He knows what he's doing. He's come up short a couple of times, but, for him to come through and win this year, a lot of credit to him. Really good player. The interesting background story, Nando, with all this is, we're both similar in age. I think Jeff is like 42, 43. And, he's been coming to these live drafts in New York, Nando, since we were in our 20s.
Where's he from?
I think now he lives in Connecticut, but he was always a New York-based guy, right? So he always came with his friend, and this is how I got to know them, was, him and Thomas Libretti. Okay, I think they're childhood close friends. They're childhood close friends, and they always came together to these live drafts. And
so Libretti's really the brains behind this.
So here's the funny thing: is Thomas Libretti, another great player in his own mind, he won the overall championship 2 years ago.
In his own mind or his own right?
What?
In his own mind or his own right?
In it. I don't even know what you're saying.
You made it sound like Thomas Libretti thinks he's a great player, but he's not.
No,
you said Thomas in his own mind.
In his own right, I think I said. Anyway, Nando, no.
Thomas Can the commenters help us out with that? I'm just trying to help him in case Thomas is
either way. If I misspoke, I'm sorry. But the point of the matter is, these two friends in the last 3 years have both now won overall championships. Okay, wow. Both New York City guys. Same age, good friends, and 2 out of the last 3 years, they win overall titles now. And it's just two guys that I've always talked to and always said, wow, these guys know what they're doing. And now they both have overall championships, to their mind. Another crazy part, just as we wrap this up, is what is Tom Libretti, after the first week of the fantasy playoffs, was second overall. And I was DMing him like, good luck, go get it, and his friend was down the leaderboard. And as the last 2 weeks went on, Jeff, goes and obviously puts up monster weeks and goes past the, up the leaderboard and wins the championship. But it looked like Tommy Libretti almost was going to win the championship again. But anyway, it's just a funny, behind the scenes story that these two friends that used to come all these years, probably for 15 years, to the New York live drafts, they both win overall championships in the same place 2 out of the last 3 years. So credit to, congrats to Jeff Kozlowski, much deserved and well earned fantasy overall, $250,000. I like to say $250,000, Nando.
Yeah.
Isn't that pretty crazy to win $250,000 in on fantasy? So,
what's sad?
Cheers to you, Jeff.
You got all these people who can win $1 million, like a millionaire maker, who just have one good day and they're 4 billion lineups. And then you got these high stakes players who are, putting high stakes down and like running a team for a season, like you said, like a business, and they only get $250,000.
Only $250,000? Well, listen,
I'm just saying against the millionaire maker, it just seems a little unfair. That's all.
Well, think about this, Nando, to your point. The millionaire makers, you're up against what? Hundreds of thousands of entries on a Sunday.
I'm sorry, I forgot. You're a big millionaire maker apologist.
No, I'm just saying, that's why you win $1 million on a milli maker lineup against hundreds of thousands of people. But in the high stakes market, you're up against thousands of people. You know how much has to go right to win an overall championship in the high stakes market nowadays?
I'm aware. Yeah. Very, very aware.
Yeah, that's funny. But you really got to get hot. You have to make every right lineup decision for 3 weeks. You have to be on the guys, the 2 or 3 guys that blow up and everything. And think about this, to Jeff's, another thing with Jeff's team, he didn't have Amari Cooper. Like, I'm shocked. I thought, you would have to have Amari Cooper or Breece Hall, right?
Right.
To at least one of them to have won an overall championship. We'll see that in the other ones I want to cover. But he did it without Kyron Williams or Christian McCaffrey or Raheem Mostert or Amari Cooper or Breece Hall. That just that was really puzzling to me that he did that. So, credit to him. Now let's cover.
Oh wait, hold on. We've blown past our break that we've got to take.
Oh my God. Yeah, that's right. Go ahead, hit that. And I want to cover a crazy, some other crazy stories.
Hey, so many ask me, what's wrong with sports books? Why so many of them fail? The answer is simple. They don't innovate. They're just casino sports books on a phone. That's all they've been. There are a few that are doing a good job. We partner with them. Most of them, not so much. Until Bet Openly came along. Bet Openly said, hey, we're going to innovate. We're going to do something groundbreaking. We're going to have peer-to-peer betting in all states, and you pay 1%. When you win, you pay just 1% on your winnings. You heard that right. It's 1%. With code Underworld, you qualify for just that 1% transaction fee on Bet Openly. It gives you ultimate flexibility to set your own lines and browse lines that others have set. Think about it. That's what betting should be. And now that is the reality. BetOpenly.com. The code is Underworld. Check it out.
All right, Chrissy V. Let's get into some other stuff that you want to talk about. I thought we should talk about Wes Miles. I know you wanted to talk about the Silver Bullet champ.
Will Miles. Yeah, sorry. Will Miles. I do want to get to Will Miles, and he won the $250,000 overall championship. And the story behind that, I think, is pretty unbelievable as well. And I will get to that in a couple minutes, Nando. But listen, as we're talking about what it takes to win an overall championship, the man who won the FFPC $1 million, okay? This is just crazy to me. Listen to his draft, Nando, out of the one hole, okay? Justin Jefferson, T. Higgins, okay? That's how he started his draft off, okay? Yeah. I want to try and set this up the right way, okay? So you lose Justin Jefferson for most of the season, and T. Higgins is one of the biggest busts you could have had, right? That's his first two picks. Then Jalen Hurts in round 3, great quarterback. Breece Hall, who pretty much did nothing. That's his 4th round pick, right? Breece Hall, who you needed, well, not you didn't need him, but obviously the last couple of weeks had monster weeks. So he wound up getting this team in. Let's look at some of his other picks. 6th round, Christian Kirk, who was good pretty much for the whole season, but again, lost him before the playoffs started. Jackson Smith and Jigba, who pretty much did nothing all year. 8th round, Zach Charbonnet, who, His 9th round pick was Raheem Mostert. Keep that in mind. His 10th and 11th round picks, he landed on your boy, Rashad Penny. Is he a bust or not this year?
He's a disappointment.
Kadarius Toney in round 11. Okay. So this man, if you look at this draft, you would think this guy maybe won 3 games all season. Okay. Because it's bust after bust after bust. Not to crap on him, but look how many unbelievable. In round 13, he made Jaden Reed, who, in the last bunch of weeks, it started coming on. Round 14, Kyron Williams, and round 18, Jared Goff. Okay, I still have no clue how this man won $1 million with this team, Nando, other than to say, he must have. He must have just been getting. But say it again.
Can you see his last week's lineup? Are you
obviously, Nando, like T. Higgins had the 2 big weeks in the fantasy playoffs, right? Yep. And Justin Jefferson came back to give production. Jalen Hurts was solid all year long. Breece Hall, monster. Now, I have no problem with this team the last 3 weeks once it got into the fantasy playoffs, right? But, how much did Raheem Mostert carry him throughout the season here, and Kyron Williams? But either way, this team got into the fantasy playoffs, and he had a lot of the right combinations to win the overall. But the point of this is just to show everybody nowadays, you do not need to, strike gold on draft day. It's just each week, manage your team to get by for that week, go on to the next week, get enough points to accumulate to get into the fantasy playoffs. And then if your team comes together, okay, like this guy's team did with a T. Higgins, Justin Jefferson coming back, Breece Hall finally blowing up, Kyron Williams obviously being the superhero. George Kittle had a nice few weeks. And that's it. You can overcome a lot of these. And Zamir White was his 19th round draft pick, which obviously he must have had Zamir White in for these fantasy playoffs. But, I just thought that was pretty crazy that you could draft that type of team, not hit home runs early on in your draft, and still win $1 million in an overall championship. So that was the FFPC online championship $1 million winner. Pretty crazy to me.
So just get in. Like in FFPC also
we just proved it, like Jeff Kozlowski. I just told you he was 6-8 in the regular season, but he was racking up the points. And that's another thing for everybody listening. Don't just go, even in home leagues. I switched a couple of my home leagues to, like the first 2 guys with record win your division. But the 3 through 6 seeds, it's more you get in on points rather than record.
Right.
Because you see it all the time. That New York Super Auction Championship team, Nando, my record after 10 weeks was 2-8. I was 2-8, but I was scoring points. I lost 1 week. I remember your good friend Mark Edelman, who
Mike Edelman.
Very good. Now you're learning. He beat me 1 week like 210 to like 192. I was racking up the points. I was still always top 3 points wise in that league, but I couldn't win every week. Whoever I was playing was just putting up a big number, but I didn't get, faulted for it. I still made the fantasy playoffs and wound up winning. But that's what everybody should do. You saw it all year long, Nando. That's what we're dealing with in fantasy as we go along. Most of my leagues that I saw after like 12 weeks, the leader was, 8-3. There was a handful of 8-3 teams, and then a bunch of 7-6, 6-7. There's nobody pulling away anymore in these leagues where, it's just like 2 dominant teams that they built an unbelievable roster and they're just putting up 185 points every week. It's rare in fantasy nowadays with all the bust and with all the injuries and the inconsistencies. That's what fantasy football is now. It's about avoiding injury and keeping your team pretty healthy and consistent, and then working the waiver wire, getting a couple good ads if you can. But it's tough to go to the waiver wire in deep, high-stakes leagues and get anything valuable off of it because everybody's ahead of the game now. Everybody knows who you want rostered. Everybody has the backup running back to the backup running back as their RB8 on a team. So it's tough, it really is. But
like someone told me Sean Turner all year, or Sean Tucker all year.
Yes. Yeah. 100%. So it's tough to be like, oh my God, let me look at my waiver wire in a deep league. And it's, Puka Nacua is sitting there and he's got 3 straight games of really big production. Let me go get him off the team. It's not like that, So I'm just surprised when you see a team like that didn't dominate at the draft table, still win an overall championship, because you do need a lot of pieces on draft day to win.
Is that what the theme kind of is this? I mean, are you picking out the anomalies so far and just being like, look at these 2 weird examples, the rest is what it usually is? Or is it kind of like, hey, like maybe it's people are getting smarter with matchups on a weekly basis and setting their lineups and overcoming some of these hardships?
It's a good question. I just think it used to be more about winning on draft day and drafting a dominant team, but there's just so much. There's so much knowledge. You used to be able to walk off away from a high stakes draft table and eliminate 5 or 6 of the drafters, like teams. And it's not like that anymore because of, like I said, the inconsistencies week to week. I never saw a year more now and in the last couple of years where you'd have a team look loaded and score 170 points 1 week, and the next week come back and play like crap and drop a 102 or a 95. And that's just the way it is, I'm just speaking on experience because I remember having teams that were just buzzsaws and just 160, and then the next week 170, 180, 150, and just dominate all year long. And you're 12-2 at the end of the year, 13-1. You don't see that anymore in high stakes fantasy football, Nando. To me, at least, there'll be the outlier. You're playing with a field of 1,500 teams, so the top 5 or 10 teams overall be consistently good. You had that league where you hit on the Keenan Allen on the, your first round pick was money your third round pick was Keenan Allen. Maybe you had Kyron Williams and Puka Nacua with a good quarterback, but just a lot of inconsistencies, Nando. That's all I'm saying. And it's just a little bit different nowadays as it was. But that's why, back to my point of just getting hot, getting your team in the fantasy playoffs, and then it's a 3-week sprint to hope you have the right combination of the right hot players at the time. So
are you going to change the way you draft because of that now? Like, I know, like, I build my teams. If I'm floating around 500 after week 12, let's say 11 or 10, I guess, to make it fun. I'm okay with that because I know I'm scoring a lot of points. And I got a couple guys on my bench who are coming back, who've been out the last 3 weeks. And I build teams specifically for the end game, right? So it's like, like the Kyron Williams, if I don't have Cam Akers, is a move I would have made. And he's a bad example because he was hot right after Cam got traded, even a little bit before. And you could have justified drafting him anyway because, he was catching a lot of passes. You could have seen like 7 targets a game from him, especially at PPR. I went back and looked at what like Jordan Rodriguez was writing about him and like the questions we asked her along the way. And she'd mentioned him a bunch of times. Saying, like,
she actually was money. Yeah, she hit that. Yeah. That somebody posted that. So I think it was Adam Leviton of Established the Run posted that about a month ago. And maybe she was on his show and said that, but I remember that tweet from August. And those little things help, Nando. Those little blurbs that we get. There is no more. I guess this is the point that I'm making, Nando. The advantage of what we had as fantasy players, if you were locked in 10 years ago, 8 years ago, is gone because of the industry blowing up the way it is. If someone, there's so many shows now on fantasy podcasts, fantasy radio, Twitter, just beat writers. There's just so much information. There's no way you're sneaking
You're
by.
Big on TikTok.
Yeah. There's no way you're sneaking by these little sleepers or whatever. And I always use the same example, Nando. Like 2013, Julius Thomas. Okay. There's no more sneaking by a Julius Thomas. The reason why I was all in on Julius Thomas that year as a Bronco, I watched, a preseason game and he played like the 2 series with Peyton Manning. Manning was peppering him, right? So I went to the draft table saying, I got to get this sleeper, Julius Thomas, in the double-digit rounds. And I did, and that helps. There's no more of that 10 years later, Nando. If a guy like a Julius Thomas nowadays, as soon as he catches 1 or 2 balls from a starting quarterback, it's blowing up all over Twitter. Yeah. Every beat reporter's writing about it.
That was Darren Waller.
Deep sleeper, Julius Thomas. He looks like he's got a good rapport with his quarterback. That'll be everywhere. And when you get to the draft table, 11.5 out of 12 guys sitting at that table is like in their back of their head is like, that Julius Thomas guy, I got to get him. So there's no more competitive edge. The only competitive edge you have at like a high stakes table is you got to hope there's a couple guys at that table are just like, this is, I have a lot of money and I want to put my money down and have my fantasy team this year to follow. And they're not really like fantasy, craze. All in. They just want to go get their hometown couple guys and have something to root for all year long. Those are the guys you want to try and attack.
Yeah, you know what? But ADP and auto draft did pretty well this year. I'm almost Renee Miller did the whole thing of like she did that draft with each personality that she gave. The person who likes the rookies, the person who auto drafts, hero RB, zero RB. Like she went through and drafted every team. Like if you were in a draft, what your team would look like. And auto draft, I think, finished second. Like 0.3 points behind first place. I feel like even that person who goes in with a good set of ADP is going to do okay and just fall into stuff by accident. I disagree. No, because I think the skill now is avoiding these. Like everyone talks about helium and avoiding helium, and I don't think you could do that entirely. Yeah. But like Devon Achane, I remember was the buzzy name before drafts.
He was.
Like people were on him so hard, and I'm like, man. You want to avoid him, but like you can't because it makes such good points. But I mean, like people are climbing over each other to get him in, earlier than they should, 2 rounds earlier than they should, and you just got to.
Yeah,
play
but was it wrong? But
no,
was it wrong? He had his weeks where he was carrying teams. Unfortunately, injury.
Because at the time you were like, there's Jeff Wilson, there's Raheem Mostert, there's Devon Achane, and like you got lucky with Wilson like losing time. And remember, it was always like, oh, Dalvin Cook's going to sign there. Oh, the Dolphins still have to trade for someone. Like there was that constant worry the Dolphins were going to make a move for another running back. And it was like, all right, like why would I? Devon Shane could be the RB4 and he's hurt. Like why would I ride this helium? And then boom.
Yeah. I'll be honest. The reason why I had a lot of Raheem Mostert was a play against. I don't think Dalvin Cook is going to wind up in Miami. And then I was like, and everybody really felt that way. And I was like, you know what? Let me just. And I had a bunch of Jeff Wilson as well. I was trying to get either Mostert or Jeff Wilson in every draft because I was like, if Cook doesn't sign there when it was late August, early September, I was like, when Cook doesn't go there, you know, one of these two running backs is going to be a major score in the double-digit rounds. Right. And, you know, it wound up being Mostert and A-Chain. A-Chain was going. A-Chain was going
Gaskin late too.
Myles Gaskin, what happened to him? He was playing at some point, but I think he got hurt and put on.
I thought they traded him.
I thought they traded him. Oh, he did get he did get traded. Yeah, he did get traded. He went to Minnesota, but I think he got hurt early on, and then they wound up trading once he was healthy. I could be wrong with that, but
that was a
Nando. We do have to.
We don't have a lot of time left.
No, we have plenty of time. We can run the show here, Nando. I have a crazy home league story, Nando, that I want to make sure I don't forget. The GST League, our home league for 18 years now. Okay. Yeah. A friend of mine who's never won it.
Different GST.
No, there's two. Yeah, there's the one that Adam Ronis and runs. That's the GST. We call it the GST, radio and listener league.
Well, Tony Cicada was the commissioner of that.
Yeah, and then he was and that's why he's no longer in the industry. But anyway, the real home league, GST league, the higher dollar amount. My friend who has never won it in 18 years, okay, came into this year. He had an absolutely loaded team, Nando. Okay, and we play it where it's $1,000 fab budget.
All right.
And once you have zero, there's no more zero bids. So the fantasy playoffs, we go into week 14, right before the fantasy playoffs is about to start. And for whatever reason, he only has Justin Herbert as his starting quarterback.
Oh, man.
And he's the 1 seed. He wins his division. He has a bye week. Okay. Justin Herbert goes down for the season. So he texts me and he's like, I can't believe that I lost Herbert. And I'm like, yeah, I know. It's terrible. Who's your backup? He's like, I don't have one. I was like, how do you not have a backup to Herbert? I was like, well, then just go and obviously go to the waiver wire. He's like, I have $0 left. I have no more money. I said, how can you zero out and only have one quarterback? So anyway, he gets a bye week. So he's in the semifinals.
Does he know what he's doing? Is he one of those guys?
Yeah, he does. He's actually he's a 1,000% a very good player. He actually plays high stakes.
He's just never won. It's just a
he's just never won. Right. It's pretty funny, but his team is absolutely loaded. So semifinal week, he has to play without a quarterback. He wins by 5 points. Okay, because his team blows up. Okay, he has an unbelievable week. A couple receivers that do really well. He had Amari Cooper.
All right, nice. And where were you in this? Okay. You were on the other side of the bracket?
I missed the playoffs. Full transparency. Missed the playoffs. The final week of this. Yeah, final week of the season.
People taking advice from you.
Yeah, terrible. Yeah. I'm transparent. That's fine. That's gonna happen.
Right.
By the way, I won the with our friend Ian. I won that home league. How about that?
Oh, great, man. Yeah. That's talking about treating it like a business. Chrissy V, that's your business right there, man.
So anyway, nice payday there. So anyway, he wins the semifinal match without Justin Herbert. He's like, can you believe this? His tight end was TJ Hawkinson. He didn't have a backup to TJ Hawkinson either. Okay. Or maybe he did and he lost that tight end as well. So he has no starting tight end and no starting quarterback entering championship week. He's like, I'm like, hey, what can you do? You made the championship game.
Wait, and he's got Amari Cooper.
And he's got Amari Cooper. I was like, listen, there's a nice payout for second place for losing in the championship game. Just be happy you made it and won the semifinal matchup. The other guy he's playing in the fantasy championship has Christian McCaffrey, Alvin Kamara, Justin Jefferson, Brock Purdy is his quarterback. Just an absolutely loaded team, all healthy, whatever. My friend goes in with no quarterback, no tight end, and loses Amari Cooper and wins the fantasy championship.
No way.
Again.
No way.
Okay? It's one of the craziest stories. And if you know it, he's like, for 18 years, I'm cursed in this league. Everything always happens to me wrong. I lose every year because of this crap, blah, 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 blah. And that's how he goes and wins the fantasy GST league in his 18th year, is without a quarterback or tight end in championship week. I just thought it was crazy. So that was the crazy home league story. I know we're up against some time. The Silver Bullet,
Congrats,
the NFFC Silver Bullet was won by high stakes legend and a all around great guy, Duke Viveros. Great guy. He deserved it. This guy, Duke Viveros, he's a volume player, but an unbelievable drafter. Just another guy that when I'm in drafts with him, I just know he's going to come out with an unbelievably great team. And he was in the top 3 overall of the NFFC Prime Time in the second week of the fantasy playoffs, top 3 of the NFFC Online Championship, and the top 3 of the Silver Bullet. He almost won all 3. So shout out to Duke Viveros. The way he won the NFFC Silver Bullet, Nando, okay, was by 0.5 of 1 point. 0.5 of 1 point, not 1 yard, less than 1 yard. He won the overall championship in the Silver Bullet, and he won it by. He was in second. He fell from first place to second place when the owner passed him with Pat Mahomes and a Chiefs stack of Mahomes, Pacheco, the Chiefs kicker. By the way, the Chiefs kicker and the Dolphins kicker, 24 points in championship week. Craziness. Pat Mahomes took a knee on the final play of the game and lost the overall championship for that particular player. And Duke Viveros won the championship by 0.5 of a point based on the Pat Mahomes knee down.
Man.
Crazy. Absolutely crazy.
I was wondering how many people, like, so that close story that you just told.
Yeah.
And I haven't seen much of this anywhere, but like, who lost by that slim margin because they got a Jared Goff 2-point conversion taken away?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like,
I've never seen it
that no one will stop talking about.
Yeah. I mean, out of all the overall championships this year, none came that close. You know, it was what'd you say?
Like, you had Lion stacks, you had Goff. A lot of people probably came in with Lion stacks.
Yeah,
Porta, Amon-Ra St. Brown.
That's the closest. I mean, you can't actually get any closer than that overall championship. I've been playing high stakes forever, and nothing's ever come down that close like that. Okay, so to lose on a kneel down is crazy. All the other champions won by 7 points, 11 points, 20 points, where it's a no doubter and it's just decided right then and there. But credit, Duke Viveros deserved it. He's deserved it for a long time, an overall championship. So props to him for getting that break on the kneel down, and another well-deserved champion. Last but not least, Nando, we have to talk about Will Miles, who won the $250,000 online championship overall, NFFC overall online championship. He did it with this loaded team of Christian McCaffrey, Jalen Hurts, Amari Cooper, Jahmyr Gibbs, Breece Hall, Mike Evans, Nico Collins in the 10th round, and hit on Brock Purdy in the 19th round, and maybe one other that I'm missing. Anyway, he left the draft table with an absolutely loaded team. Okay, now this is a online championship. You have to beat out 5,000 teams. Will did the absolute nuts of a week in week 16, scoring 264 points. And he had the dream combination of Amari Cooper, Breece Hall, and Christian McCaffrey. Well, McCaffrey scored 42 week 1, but Cooper and Breece Hall scored 51 and 44 in the second week, and he scored 264 points to blow past everybody that particular week, and then hold on in the final championship week. But he had the right play. Oh, and Mike Evans as well, who was phenomenal in that second week. But, he had the dream combination of players. And here's the crazy part of Will Miles' overall championship. First off, Will is 29 years old, the
Nice.
youngest champion ever in the high stakes market. Here's where it's crazy, Nando. When I tell you there was crazy stories behind all these overall champions, 2 years ago, the way I just talked about how Tommy Libretti won the championship 2 years before his close best friend won the overall championship 2 years later. 2 years ago, Billy Wazowski, our good friend, right?
Billy Waz.
Our boy Billy Wazowski, Billy Waz, won the online championship, the same exact event. Okay, he won it 2 years ago. 2 years later, Will Miles won the overall championship. Will Miles is a teacher with Billy in the same school in Virginia. And Billy got Will involved in fantasy football, playing in these online championships.
Wow.
So not only is that, it's just mind-boggling to me that 2 years apart, Billy wins the same event that his fellow teacher in the same school wins this year. In Virginia, same school. 2 of the last 3 overall championships are teachers in the same school in Virginia. What is in the water? What is in the water in Virginia that school? I might go sign up to be a teacher in that school now after knowing the background story of all this.
I would caution against you teaching children things.
Yeah, they would have to find a role for me because teaching probably isn't my specialty, but just unbelievable.
You would call on a kid to answer a question and then answer it yourself. Just go, I'm going to do this myself up here on the board.
Yeah, pretty much. There you go, Nando.
Yeah.
But it's just crazy that the background story.
You know what 2 + 2 is 4. Let me just finish that for you.
Yeah, there you go. But isn't that amazing, Nando? When you hear these stories cool. In the behind the scenes stories of how 2 friends that know each other win the not only $250,000 primetime NFFC championship, but the $250,000 online championship story.
Yeah, it's cool. There's cool stories out there.
Pretty nuts. Yeah, it's pretty nuts to me. So those, that's a high stakes recap, pretty much right there, Nando. Congrats to all of them for winning these championships, and just cool stories behind all of them. So I'm glad we could do a show like this. We
had no choice because
recognizing them. That's right. Yeah. Well, I mean, listen. You show up 5 minutes before a show every week and say, what are we talking about? I didn't watch any football. So at least that's why I talk for 58 minutes of it and you talk for 2.
I am a professional.
Do you want to talk about how you had to delay the show a half hour because you had a meeting and weren't professional enough to give me a heads up on that last night so we could delay the show?
It was scheduled for a half hour and it went an hour, man. What do you want me to do?
No.
You changed this last week. You made us go on Thursday when people needed.
It was Christmas week. It was Christmas week, Nando.
It was championship week to some people,
and we gave them an extra day.
Yeah. Anyway,
to prepare.
This is great. Hope everybody enjoyed the show. This is the last time you'll see us together.
That's not true. Next week we will be back and we will be doing
no, we're not
fantasy.
Doing are we? I thought we're at like 4 weeks from now.
Yes. No. Next week we're back and we're doing. We're going to be breaking down, doing a live NFFC fantasy playoff contest entry together, Nando. So look forward to that. If you're entering that contest, we'll be giving you the ins and outs of what to do and how we're going to enter our entry into that next week. So another fun show.
Dual entry, right?
Dual entry, yeah. If we win, it's 51% me, 49% you.
Partners. Oh, that's the most credit you've ever given me for anything. All right, in. Thanks for joining us, everybody. We hope you had a lovely time. We know that we did. And let me just pull up the music here real quick.
Peace out, everyone.